Hello and welcome to the first prequel of my lesson series. Real quick, why am I doing prequels? Well, as I was going through the first lesson, I kept feeling like if you didn't know the things that I was assuming you already knew, you were kind of screwed. And that the entire lesson series kind of hinged on some basic music theory knowledge that I felt like necessarily people might not know or at least know completely. So to clear my own conscience and to make things at least a little bit easier on people, I figured I would make a general overview of everything that I'm assuming you know coming into this, and just give the short version on everything so that everyone starts on the same page. Alright, so with that in mind, let's get started with today's little lesson. So today is going to be about notes, and then we're going to move on to intervals and chords from notes. But let's jump into it. Alright, so all of music, from the most complicated symphonies to the most basic melodies, are comprised of 12 notes. That is, the entirety of music is 12 notes. There are 7 natural notes, and there are 5 accidentals. The 7 natural notes are the letters of the alphabet A through G, so A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And the 5 accidentals are notes that fall in between those natural notes. Why are they called naturals, and why are they called accidentals? Naturals are naturals because they're not accidentals, and accidentals are accidentals because they're not naturals. It's as annoying as that. There is probably more behind it, but the amount of time and the effort that it takes to get into it isn't really worth it. So just take it on my word that naturals are naturals, accidentals are accidentals, and that's all there is to it. Going now to talk about the accidentals. As I said, the accidentals are notes that fall in between some of the natural notes. So to count out all 12 notes, it would go A sharp or B flat, B, C, C sharp or D flat, D, D sharp or E flat, E, F, F sharp or G flat, G, G sharp or A flat, and then back to A. So two things about that. As you noticed, I said A sharp or B flat. That's called enharmonics. So enharmonics is a fancy way to say something that has 2 names. So A sharp and B flat are the same note. So in this case, it's a note that has 2 names. Enharmonics doesn't just refer to notes; it refers to anything that it's 2 names for the same thing in music. And it's a very important concept. Enharmonics comes up a lot, so that's something I would definitely suggest remembering. But the important part for right now is just that A sharp and B flat are the same note. Also, the second thing that you probably noticed, I got a little itch there. The second thing that you probably noticed is that between B and C and between E and F, there were no accidentals. There's no B sharp or C flat. There's no E sharp or F flat. This is just because of the physical properties of the notes. All notes are frequencies, and there is not enough room between the B and the C frequencies for there to be an accidental. It's very important to remember that, and that comes up a lot. That's kind of one of those really fundamental quirks about music that you really have to have down. So that and enharmonics are probably the 2 biggest things we just talked about. Alright, so moving on to the next part. Musical distance. So the easiest way to refer to musical distance kind of refers to physical distance, almost, and is semitones versus tones and half step versus whole step. So actually I'm going to borrow my guitar real quick to help illustrate this point. Hopefully not pull out any power chords in the process. Alright. So I'll bring this up a little bit. Be a little weird. There we go. Alright. So semitones is when you move over. Semitone and a half step is the same thing. So semitone on the guitar is moving over a fret. So if we play at the 5th fret, play A, and move over to the 6th fret. Now you probably can't hear that. It's not really important. It's just to show the physical distance. This is a semitone or a half step. So if we go from the 5th fret to the 6th fret, that's a half a step. If we go from the 5th fret to the 7th fret, that's a whole step. So again, half, 5 to 6, whole, 5 to 7. Okay. That's important because that's how scales are referenced. That's how a lot of maneuvers are referenced, is whole step versus half step, or tone versus semitone. Now the important part, and also echoing back to that, B, C, E, F, no accidentals, no sharps. Half steps aren't just from natural notes to accidentals or accidentals to natural notes. The half, A to A sharp is a half step, but A sharp to B is a half step. A to B is a whole step, but B to C is a half step. The distance that would be on your guitar is how you refer to the steps, or the distance that the physical notes would be on, a keyboard even. What ones have black keys in between them, what ones are just white keys next to each other. And that's really important to remember, that it's not just a simple counting thing. There is a pattern to it, but you have to remember what that pattern is. And you have to remember, again, B and C is only a half step, as is E and F. Alright, moving on from there, then just to talk about the basic elements of music, it's really this is where I'm really getting to skimming the surface, but there's melody and there's harmony. And to kind of break that down to three musical parts, there's melodies, intervals, and chords. A melody is just a series of notes. So any singly played notes in a series to a rhythm is a melody. An interval is two notes played at the same time, and all the intervals have different names. That'll probably actually be in the first lesson. We'll talk a little bit about that at least, and if not, a later lesson. And chords are three or more notes played simultaneously. Now, where lines get a little hazy is chords can also be what's called arpeggiated, which is each note of the chord is played at played individually. So, for example, a C major chord is comprised of the notes C, E, and G. So if you play the notes C, E, and G right after each other, not together in the sense of at the same time, but one, C, then E, then G, you have arpeggiated C major. So you've technically played a chord, but you've played it as if it was a melody, and you could have a melody that goes C, E, G, and then down things. So that's where lines can get blurry, but generally arpeggiated chords are still considered chords and not melodies. And that is actually it for this lesson. So again, to recap real quickly, you have 7 natural notes, 5 accidentals. There's no accidental between B and C or E and F. Melodies is a series of notes. Intervals are 2 notes at the same time. Chords are multiple notes at the same time. And melodies are a group of single notes, and harmonies are groups of notes that play with the melody. I know I didn't say the melody harmony thing actually in the beginning of the lesson, but I think that's okay, because that's more of a thinking concept that won't come up until later. Alright, so that is the end of this prequel. The second prequel will be on rhythm and reading music, and that will be it. Alright, so I will see you guys later.